Prepare for a truth revolution.
Actually, you can prove God exists.
Questioning tradition, because what you've been taught isn't always true.
The truth will set you.
Welcome to Truth Revolution. This is where faith and reason meet. I am Dave, and with me is Pastor Jeff from Revolution Church.
And this is Easter.
Yay! Happy Easter!
This is the day Jesus rose from the dead, and so we're going to be talking about that. But first, I want to invite you out to Revolution Church. Today, we have services at 9 o'clock, at 11 o'clock, and if you really want to sleep in, or if you're working, 5 p.m.
Right.
So any three of those, they're all...
Well, if you're listening to the show actually live, you can't make it to the 9 o'clock one. But you can make it to the 11 o'clock one,
yes,
and the 5 o'clock one.
That's right. That's true. That's true. So, yeah, you can make it to the 11 o'clock service or the 5 p.m. service. Just come on out. I mean, you've thought about it. You've heard the radio show. You've thought about coming out. There's going to be a lot of guests here today. No one's going to point you. No one will ever point you out.
Right.
I mean, people should probably shake your hand and be like, hey, have I met you yet?
Yeah. But they're giving free bunnies at the door.
Wait a minute. I didn't know about this.
Shh. It's a marketing ploy.
Right. I do know you get free coffee, but I didn't, free smoothies or cappuccinos or whatever. But, yeah, I really would like you to come out. We do this church so that people who maybe don't feel like they would fit in a church would fit in our church. I'm wearing jeans. People, if you haven't seen our ad on Facebook, you should go watch it, the video ad. That's hilarious.
Yeah, this is definitely a church that doesn't fit into the norm of a church.
Yeah.
So,
you know. I mean, we joke around by saying, even if you don't have a tattoo, you can still come.
Right.
So
we won't judge you if you have bare arms.
Yeah. So 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. We got lots of stuff going on for the kids today too. Whether you have kids or not, just come on out. So, all right. So today we're talking about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Is it logical? Does it make sense?
Yes and yes.
How do you know that?
Because I've studied it for so long.
Yeah, well, we use this little thing called the FEAT acronym.
That's F.E.A.T.
As in the greatest feat in human history. And this was not developed by us. We didn't make this. This was made by a guy named Hank Hanegraaff in his book called FEAT, F.E.A.T. And it stands for F is for fatal torment. The E stands for
empty tomb.
The A is appearances. And the T is?
Transformation.
You cheated.
I did.
You just flipped over and looked at it.
Well, how do you know I wasn't looking at something else?
Well, it's at the top of the page you turned to.
Don't judge me.
Don't judge me.
All right, are we comfy?
Now, all right. So, fatal torment. This is how we know that Jesus really rose from the dead. And the first thing is at fatal torment. We have to say that he died before we can say he rose from the dead.
Right, that's given.
Because some people will say, no, he wasn't really dead when you put him in the tomb. And so, now we got to be clear on this. The reason we're not making the argument about his existence and stuff like that is because most scholars agree Jesus was a real person.
Right.
Even atheist scholars will agree Jesus was a real person, and he really was killed by the Roman government.
Right, and there was too much written about him outside of Scripture for us to just deny his existence.
So he is a real figure that was really put to death by the Romans, and what happens next is interesting. So we have to say, do we know for sure that he died?
Right, it's not like the old, I kind of fainted and then woke up a day later and da-da, here I am.
Right. Did they put him in the tomb and he kind of woke up? And well, just to make this clear, let's say, okay, Jesus suffered from hematidrosis.
Right.
All right. This is a medical condition causing the excretion of blood into sweat, which also makes your skin extremely fragile. How do we know about this? How do we know that this happened? He was in the place called the Garden of Gethsemane.
Right.
And he was praying. You remember what it says?
Yes, and he was actually under a lot of stress. But it says that he was asking God, he's like, if this cup can be passed from me, please take it from me.
Because he knew what was going to happen.
Right, but your will be done. And I can imagine he was probably under great amount of stress, and that's usually a condition that hematidrosis comes into as a moment of great stress.
Exactly. And I would say carrying and bearing the sins of the entire world while you're being crucified and beat is pretty stressful.
Yeah.
So he knew that was going to happen. He was stressed out. And hematidrosis is this medical condition. We know about it. And it says in Scripture, they didn't call it a medical condition. They don't know what it was. They just said his sweat was like drops of blood. Right. Well, we know now what that is and what was happening. And so already his skin was very fragile. He had already lost some blood. And then what did they do to Jesus after they arrested him?
What didn't they do to Jesus after they? The list might be shorter. Actually,
they didn't give him cake.
Right.
They didn't worship him.
Well, they beat him. Punched
him in the face.
Yeah, scourging.
The scourging is a big deal, right? They would take whips with little pieces of bone or metal on the end. They would basically fillet you.
Right.
They would tie you to a stump or a tree or a log or a post, and they would whip you from the top of your shoulders down your back all the way to the bottoms of your feet.
Right. Didn't they call that the half death? Or am I thinking about?
Yeah, they called it the half death because a lot of people were basically halfway dead when they finished. Some people even died during this process. Right. And so once they got all the way down and your skin was just like strips hanging off of you, blood everywhere, they would actually then flip you over and do it to your front side.
Oof.
And so this is scourging. And after the scourging...
Yeah, they put the crown of thorns on his head, and actually it wasn't as if they just lightly placed it there.
Like in Hollywood?
Right. Oh, we just put this crown of thorns on.
It's got a crown of thorns. Let's set it on there all dainty-like.
Yeah, and they shoved it down on his brow and actually beat it into place.
Now, all you have to do is use your brain to think about it. Like, why would they make a crown out of thorns? And then we actually have record that they beat him on the head after this. So, like, you got to think about what's going to happen. These are big thorns. They're purposely putting it on his head to cause him pain. They're hitting him on the head afterwards. And then these nails that were 5/8 inch thick, 7 or 8 inches long. I mean, they were closer to railroad ties than what we think is nails.
Railroad spikes. You said
railroad spike. Did I say ties? Railroad tie was driven through his hand.
Yikes.
Whoa! What happened to his hand? Yeah, the railroad spike was, I mean, these things were driven through his hand, which actually probably they described it as hand. Back then, the general area of their hand, but we get a little more specific. We have hand, palm, wrist. It was probably a little bit below the palm and driven right through that part of the wrist. It's a little bit stronger there. It can hold bodies up better.
Right.
And so then he was literally nailed to a cross.
Oof.
And how do you die during a cross? How do you die?
Well, the body. The thing is that they nail their feet to the cross, and the people that are condemned typically try and push themselves up with their feet so that they can take a breath, and then they go back down. It's basically you suffocate to death, or basically your lungs fill with fluid.
Yeah, you asphyxiate, and because being hung by your hands like that causes you to asphyxiate. So as Dave pointed out, you push up with your feet, you can live longer to take these breaths. But it's very difficult.
Which is one of the reasons why it says at one point they went through and started breaking legs.
Yes. And when they got to Jesus, they didn't have to break his leg because he was dead. Already dead. Right. Now, these are professional executioners, okay? They killed more people than Texas kills.
Right. They got money for it. They were professional killers. This is what they did.
And these Roman soldiers, if they didn't do the job, they would be crucified. Right. So they actually, just to make sure Jesus was really dead, they shoved a spear straight through his heart and lungs. Says blood and water flowed.
Right. They pierced the pericardium.
That's right. The little sac around the heart. Water came out of there. Or what looked like water came out of there. And so, I mean, you just think about all these things. The beatings, the punching, the scourging up and down your body, the crown of thorns, the nails, the hematidrosis, the crucifixion itself, and the spear through the heart. I don't care who you are. Yeah. You go through all that, you're going to get put on a surgeon's table, and you are still going to die.
Right. This was no skipping through a field of daisies.
No.
You know.
And I mean, even if by some crazy stretch of the imagination, a spear through Jesus' heart, being crucified, having hematidrosis, being nailed to a cross, having crown of thorns, being scourged up and down and beaten, didn't kill him? Imagine he would wake up in the tomb and somehow have to push this gigantic stone out of the way by himself, which normally takes a group of people, and then overpower the Roman soldiers who were guarding his tomb.
Who were also paid to guard things.
And then walk more than a mile back to the city where his disciples would be, and then they would look at him, bloody, stumped, beating Roman soldiers, all pulped, dead, looking ghastly, and they would look at him and go, oh, he's risen from the dead. I want a body just like his.
Yeah.
Because that's what Scripture says. Like, our hope is that we'll have a body like Christ someday.
No, you make a really good point there. I mean, if by some way he miraculously survived all that, there's no way he's coming out there and not actually having to recover for months.
So he was dead. Right? He was dead when they put him in the tomb. DEA, dead. we're going to go ahead and do a Bible contradiction right now. It actually has to do with the tomb, so we're going to get in here.
Bible contradiction.
All right, Bible contradiction today brought to you by the fine folks at evilbible.com.
Okay.
When Jesus rose from the dead, when did the women find the tomb? After sunrise, or was it before? Mark 6:2 says very early on the first...
16:2.
That's what I said.
Okay. I
I'm
thought you
thinking
said
too.
6.
I don't know. Mark 16:2. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb. However, John 20, verse 1 says early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance.
So was it after sunrise or was it still dark?
There's a bona fide contradiction there if I ever saw one.
So we're going to solve this with our cracked acronym like we normally do. The second C stands for what, David?
The second C is credibility.
That's right. And the D stands for?
A dialect.
We're going to use both of these. All right, so you're reading something, and it appears to have a little contradiction in it. I don't care what you're reading. You have to give it some credit. You have to give credibility to this author and say, if I see something in there that looks strange, I can't just throw my hands up, say, contradiction, this is stupid, and walk away.
Right.
I have to at least attempt to resolve it because I probably misunderstand what was written. And I feel like when they call this a contradiction, they're just throwing their hands up and going, "Oh, I see it. I don't even want to solve it."
Anybody who is honest with themselves will give it some credibility.
Because all you have to do, just listen to it. Okay, it was the first verse says it was just after sunrise, and the second one says while it was still dark.
Right.
Now think about it. Okay. Could anybody in the world say it's dark out just after sunrise?
Yes.
You see, you're not even giving these people any credit when you say this is a contradiction.
Right.
Lots of people. My kids, as soon as they see the sun start to peek out, will be like, "It's time to get up on Saturday!"
Right.
And I'll be like, "No, it's still dark."
Right.
Right? It's just a perspective thing. And also the D for dialect, like what types of language are they using? We use different descriptive words. So Dave might call his a color blue, and I might call it aqua. Even we're just saying it's this shade, it's in this area. And so he was saying it was just after sunrise. Mark said that. John said it was still dark. But the concept is it was right around sunrise. It was still pretty dark. The sun was just rising then. Probably, around 6 a.m. or something like that.
Right.
And so this is an easy way to resolve that. It's definitely not a Bible contradiction.
Bible contradiction.
And that leads us to the empty tomb.
That's right. Before we get to the empty tomb, I just want to remind everybody that our church services today are at 11 o'clock and 5 p.m.
Right. You already missed 9 o'clock.
You already missed 9 o'clock. But 11 o'clock and 5 p.m., you got to come on out. I mean, why not? What do you got to lose?
Right. Yeah. Even if, and like Jeff says all the time, please give us 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
And we guarantee you that, you're going to have some kind of feeling towards it. You're going to really, 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 really hate us.
Yeah.
You're going to really, 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 really love us.
Sure. And if you don't like it, you don't have to come back. No one's going to harass
Right.
you. But, I mean, you don't have anything to lose by just trying.
Right.
So, all right. We'd love to have you out here. Just try it 3 or 4 times in a row. See what you think. Okay. E, empty. So we know Jesus was dead because the F, fatal torment, he was dead. E, empty tomb.
Right.
Will you read this thing about the female factor that we have written down?
It says the books of the Bible would not have included females as discoverers of the tomb unless it really happened.
And why do we say that?
Well, because back then, if you were trying to actually have a cover-up or something like that,
Yes.
you wouldn't include females with that because of the fact that their witness wasn't really credible at that back then.
They were not allowed to serve as legal witnesses.
Right.
And think about this. Women were not... We do now... Nowadays we know. Back then they were not allowed to be considered legal witnesses. People didn't trust women. But the Bible records women as the first discoverers of the empty tomb.
Right. And if this is actually a bona fide cover-up, that doesn't happen.
They wouldn't have done that.
Right.
They would have made it like someone important. Plus, the Roman government and the Jewish authorities all agreed the tomb of Jesus was empty. The governments even admit it. Satyricon, ancient historian, says he was in terror of punishment and explained to the legate what had taken place. He would await no sentence of court-martial, but would punish his neglected duty with his own sword.
Wow.
Right? Roman soldiers would not fall asleep or neglect their duty. They wouldn't, or they would have died. So, and this historian records it for us. So, the Roman soldiers didn't just walk away, but the tomb really was empty. The governments and the women prove it. We're going to come right back, talk more about the appearances and transformation.
Truth Revolution.
And we're trying to figure out, hey, man, did this resurrection thing actually really happen?
Yeah, what's up with that? We claim Jesus rose from the dead. Is there any reason to believe he did? So far, we've set the stage. We talked about how Jesus did really die. He was an actual person. People agree with that. He really did die. The Roman government put him to death. The Jewish government, Roman government, all agreed the tomb was empty. So we know that he died, and we know the tomb was empty 3 days later.
Right. We knew he at least disappeared from the tomb.
That's right.
So,
if nothing else, we have to agree that Jesus really did die, and that 3 days later, the tomb was empty. Because even the governments agreed the tomb was empty. It was a big scandal.
Right. Nobody disputes that whatsoever.
Even the Bible records women as having discovered the empty tomb, which they would not have done if they were making a story up.
Right.
So, because women back then weren't considered trustworthy, even though we know better now.
Right. But here comes the really exciting part.
Here comes the exciting part. All right. So, he was dead, and then the tomb was empty, but did someone steal his body? Well, it would have overpower Roman guards. I don't know, but also something else tells us that they didn't just overpower the Roman guards and steal his body. There's this little thing, the F.E.A.T acronym. The A stands for
appearances.
That's right. F.E.A.T, the greatest feat in history, fatal torment, empty tomb, appearances. 1 Corinthians 15, verses 3 to 8. We're not going to read it, but it gives us this description, and it says this.
Well, Jesus appeared to, at a minimum, 500 people on 12 different occasions, spread over a 40-day period of time.
That's 500 people. And in there, he says most of these people are still living. So when they wrote this book, in 1 Corinthians, when he wrote this letter, he was explaining to them, these people are still alive. Over 500 people he appeared to, they're still alive. Why would he say that?
Yeah, go look them up.
Right, go look them up. Find them. Ask them. Did you really see Jesus alive? This is the thing. There was eyewitness testimony, the best type of testimony you can get 2,000 years ago. They didn't have video recorders. Sorry, can't have that for you. But they had the next best thing, which is eyewitness testimony, not from 1 or 2 or 3 people, but 500 people.
Right.
And 12 different occasions. So it wasn't like one-time thing. Everybody ate bad mushrooms and was like, we saw Jesus. Right? This is like 500 people, 12 different times over a 40-day period. It wasn't just one shot. It wasn't just lucky one time. Many, many people claim to have seen Jesus. But here's the kicker.
Okay.
The T in FEAT stands for transformation. If we don't include this, the rest of it basically fails.
Right.
Now, if you haven't gone out to Revolution Church, you need to come out at 11 o'clock or 5 o'clock. I think I've said that before on the show today.
Yeah,
I just want to make it clear. All right, because it's Easter, man. You're not going to lose anything by coming to church on Easter.
Right.
Like, just come today, and then you can decide if you'll do our little challenge of like coming three or 4 times. I really think once you're here 3 or 4 times, you're going to be like, yeah, this place is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
I'll stick around here. It's worth my time. It's worth your time. Maybe that's the best way to put it.
It is. It's worth your time.
It's worth your time to come. We try really hard to make it worth your time to learn about God with other people. All right, so the T, though. The T stands for
transformation.
Fatal torment. He was really dead. Empty tomb. The tomb really was empty 3 days later. Appearances. He really did appear to 500 people. Or at least 500 people claim that they saw him. But here's the deal. The transformation of the people who claim to have seen him is massive.
Right.
Okay, it's one thing to say, yeah, I saw Tupac alive. But it's another thing to base your entire life on that.
Yes. Yeah, and it's one thing. It's like you could stay it, but are you going to stake your life on that?
Would you die if someone put a gun to your head and said, okay, if you say Tupac is alive, I'm going to shoot you right now? And would you still say, even if you believed it, would you still say, yeah, Tupac's alive, you can kill me because I believe it? No, I mean, people can be like, no, I don't care, whatever.
Because it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
About Tupac. Tupac didn't matter.
Right? Look, the first consensus was Jesus is dead and not worthy of praise. I want you to pay attention to how people, even his followers, acted right after this. Okay, Thomas was once a strong follower of Jesus, but after Jesus' death, he was a skeptic. He did not believe Jesus was alive. Actually, Jesus showed up to the apostles, and Thomas wasn't there when Jesus showed up. I don't know why Jesus showed up at this time. Like, okay, Thomas left. I think I'll go now.
Right.
But Jesus showed up. Thomas was gone getting groceries or something. Thomas comes back, and he's like, everyone's like, we saw Jesus.
Yeah, you missed it.
Yeah, and he's like, whatever. And then Jesus shows up again. And Thomas is still having a hard time believing it. This is John chapter 20.
Right. John said, he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hands into his side, I will not believe it.
That was Thomas.
Right. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. See my hands? Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. Then Jesus said to him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed.
There you go. I guess once Jesus showed up, Thomas actually just, okay,
Right.
This is legit. This is real. I said he still had a hard time believing, but I was wrong. I mean, Jesus showed up and he was right there. Boom, Thomas believed. But he had a hard time believing. And here's the most important part. Okay, this isn't just some made-up story. History tells us that Thomas transformed from this skeptic into a martyr because he believed he saw the risen Jesus.
And died for his faith.
He died for his faith. People killed him because he claimed Jesus had risen from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And he claimed this all the way to his death, that he had seen Jesus. He was a martyr because of this belief. Now, I'm sorry, but you only die for things that you believe to be true.
Right.
You don't die for something you're like, well, I know it's a lie, but I'm going to die for it because I like it.
Right.
No, look, Peter was another big guy. This is Mark chapter 14. This is right after people asked Peter, do you know Jesus? Jesus had been arrested. Peter kind of followed him like way far behind. Mm-hmm. And people saw him like, hey, weren't you with Jesus? And this is what happens.
Now, he began to call down curses upon himself, and he swore to them, I don't know this man you're talking about. Peter swore he didn't even know Jesus, calling curses on himself.
That's right. So fear basically drove Peter to deny Jesus. And right after Jesus' death, you could have found him hiding
Right.
hiding with the rest of the disciples.
Yeah, scared.
He called down curses himself. In other words, in our modern day vernacular, he'd say, look, I don't blankety blank know what you're talking about.
Right.
And God cursed me if this isn't true. I don't even know who Jesus is. Whoa. That was Peter. But after Jesus appeared to him, Peter changed from a bold denier into a bold follower of Jesus, a preacher. And he's telling everybody, I saw it with my own eyes. Jesus was alive. And what happened to Peter?
Peter was actually crucified upside down.
That's right. And this is not from the Bible. This is a historical record. A guy named Tertullian, a ancient historian, wrote this.
But if you are near Italy, you have Rome, where authority is at hand for us too. What a happy church that is, on which the apostles poured out their whole doctrine with their blood, where Peter had a passion like that.
Passion is like death. Back then, that was literally death.
He had a passion like that of the Lord, where Paul was crowned with the death of John the Baptist by being beheaded.
Okay, so Tertullian, this ancient historian, claims that Peter was crucified. He was crucified. And church history and writings from the 2nd century AD actually says that Peter was crucified upside down because he felt unworthy to be crucified in the same manner as Jesus. So Peter transforms from this scared denier into this bold preacher willing to die because he says he saw Jesus alive.
Amen.
This is crazy. Now, here's my favorite one, James. This is my favorite one because James was the brother of Jesus.
Right.
Now, Dave,
you've asked me this question before.
What would it take you to believe that your brother was God?
A lot.
A lot. For me to believe that my brother was God.
You can't handle the truth.
Right? Like, I don't know if I could ever.
Right.
And James wasn't going to either.
Right.
In fact, here's what they thought about Jesus early on in the ministry.
All right, this is in Mark. That Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, he is out of his mind.
Okay, so James thought Jesus was crazy. Wouldn't you think your brother was crazy if he claimed to be God? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd think my brother was crazy too. But Jesus showed up and appeared to his brother James. And then James started believing, oh my goodness, my brother's alive. I saw him die, but he's alive. And this is when everything changed. The ancient Roman historian Josephus wrote this.
So he assembled the Sanhedrin of judges and brought before them the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ, whose name was James, and some others. And then he had formed an accusation against them as breakers of the law. He delivered them to be stoned.
Okay, so even James, the brother of Jesus, changed from a person who thought Jesus was actually insane to someone who would give up his life because he believed he saw Jesus risen from the dead. And he believed. I mean, these are massive stories that are so important. And then you have Saul, who changed to Paul. We don't have time to get into this one yet, but and then you have you got to study Saul, Paul. Go to truthrevolution.tv and type in Saul, S-A-U-L. This is like the biggest transformation ever. These people, they saw Jesus and their entire life changed. All right, nobody knows what they dies for what they know to be a lie, but people die for things they believe in. All right, these Jews, when they saw Jesus risen, look, every Jew sacrificed animals, but when Jesus died, those who believed stopped sacrificing animals.
Right.
This was like their whole culture was based around sacrificing animals, but they saw Jesus risen from the dead, and they said, "I don't need to sacrifice animals anymore because someone was my ultimate sacrifice."
Right.
Their whole culture changed. They started eating bacon. They changed the Sabbath, which was their other huge thing, from Saturday. They started celebrating on Sunday. And you got to go listen to the prophecies. Not only was there people who saw him raised from the dead and they gave up their lives for it, but you got to listen to the prophecies. Go to truthrevolution.tv, type in prophecy. Statistical probability says there's no way anyone could fulfill the prophecy Jesus did by accident. The proof is there, friends. He rose from the dead, and he's God. We can either trust that or deny it. But I'm hoping you'll trust that and come out to Revolution Church today at 11 o'clock or 5 p.m.
Get on out here.
You got plenty of time, 11 o'clock, or even if you miss it, 5 p.m., but don't just skip it. You're going to be tempted to skip it, but don't. Be here at 11 or 5. We'd love to have you.